During the summer holidays, a group of students, Igor, Marina, Sasha, and Vika, decided to spend time away from the hustle and bustle of the city. They chose an old lake located a few kilometers from the nearest village. This place attracted them with its silence, beauty, and the opportunity to fish. Igor, an avid fisherman, insisted on this trip, assuring his friends that the lake was famous for its huge fish. When they arrived, the villagers greeted them with caution. When asked how to get to the lake, the locals only shook their heads and tried to dissuade them from going. One old man sitting on a bench near the store finally broke the silence. "You don't understand where you're getting into," he said, looking straight at Igor. "This lake is cursed. Something lives under its smooth surface. People go there and never come back." The friends laughed, considering his words another village tale, an invention to scare away strangers. "Of course, fairy tales for tourists," Igor said, waving his hand. "Most likely someone just drowned here a long time ago and you inflated a myth out of it." But Vika noticed that the old man's eyes were full of seriousness and anxiety. "It calls people to itself," he continued. "Calls, whispers, beckons, and when a person enters the water, it does not let go. Listen, before it is too late. Go home." But the old man's words did not make the desired impression. The students decided that this was just part of the local folklore. The lake seemed calm to them, and the landscapes around were fabulously beautiful. Having arrived at the place, they set up camp on the shore and began to prepare for the night. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. The sun gilded the surface of the water, the tall pines swayed in the light wind, and the air was filled with freshness. Everything looked perfect. Only Vika felt a strange uneasiness from time to time. It seemed to her that the lake was looking at them, as if evaluating them. "Oh, come on," Sasha told her, noticing her tension. "It's just water. Look how beautiful it is." But when the sun began to set, the atmosphere changed. The silence became almost oppressive, and the surface of the lake no longer seemed so peaceful. Something was flashing in the water, either the reflections of the moon or a strange movement under the surface. As the sun sank below the horizon, the students lit a fire to keep warm and light up the camp. They sat around, talking, laughing, and telling each other stories. But their joy began to fade when Vika, distracted from her conversation, noticed a strange light coming from the lake. "Look," she said, her voice trembling. Everyone turned around. The surface of the water, which had seemed black in the night, was now glowing with a muted, cold light, as if a shining haze was rising from the depths of the lake. The light shimmered, wavering, as if beckoning. "What the hell is this?" Sasha asked, frowning. "Probably phosphorescence." Igor waved it off, trying to sound confident. "That happens on some lakes. It's beautiful." But Vika and Marina exchanged glances. They couldn't shake the feeling that this light was unnatural. There was something frightening about it, as if the water itself had come to life. When the night deepened, Igor, who had always been the most courageous and self-confident, suddenly declared, "I'm going to go for a swim. It's such a night and the water is calling." His eyes shone with excitement, but perhaps with something else, too, barely noticeable, but strange. "Are you crazy?" Marina screamed. "It's dangerous. You can't go into the water at night." "Oh, come on. I won't be long. It's shallow here." He stood up and, despite his friend's protests, moved toward the lake. Vika noticed how he glanced back at them over his shoulder, his face lit up for a moment by the light of the fire, and it seemed to her that it was strangely empty, as if it was no longer quite him. Igor entered the water, which suddenly seemed smooth as a mirror. The light around him began to intensify, acquiring an eerie, ghostly hue. "Igor, come out!" Vika screamed. But he did not react. He went deeper and deeper until the water reached his chest. "You feel it? It's..." "Calling," he said, stopping but not turning around. His voice sounded muffled, as if he was speaking from underwater. Suddenly, Igor disappeared. There was no splash, no cry, only a quiet sound, like a deep breath, and the water became motionless again. The light went out. The friends froze. A few seconds seemed like an eternity. Then Sasha jumped up, ran to the edge of the water, and began to shout, "Igor! This is not funny, come out." But the water was silent. They searched for him all night. They tried to shout, to light the shore with flashlights, but the lake seemed to absorb their attempts. It seemed that even the sound disappeared, barely reaching the water. By dawn, they were sitting on the shore, exhausted, terrified. Igor was nowhere to be found. No floating body, no traces. Only now, Marina remembered the old man's words. It doesn't let go. They couldn't believe what had happened, but Vika, looking at the water, noticed something in its depths. For a moment, it seemed to her that Igor's face flashed in the cold surface, and it hummed, was smiling. After Igor's disappearance, the friends gathered around the fire in a panic. No one knew what to do. The lake seemed to be frozen in anticipation, its surface smooth as glass, but sometimes a frightening light still broke through from the depths, reminding them that it had taken Igor. "We have to leave, and now," Marina said in a trembling voice, her face pale. "Something's wrong here. If we stay, we too will disappear." Yes, we're leaving," Sasha hurried, grabbing his things. But as soon as they tried to move away from the shore, something strange happened. Their feet seemed to have grown into the ground. Each step was taken with incredible effort, as if something was holding them in place. "I can't move!" Vika exclaimed, her voice breaking into a scream. She felt something cold and invisible wrap around her ankles, pulling her back toward the water. "Don't look back," Sasha shouted. He himself didn't know where this thought came from, but he intuitively felt that if they looked at the lake, it would be the end. But Marina couldn't resist. Her gaze slid to the water and she suddenly froze, as if frozen. Her eyes widened. She opened her mouth to say something, but instead a strange wet sound was heard, as if air had burst from her throat. Her body swayed limply, and she began to slowly walk toward the lake, as if she was being led. "Marina, stop!" Vika shouted, but her friend didn't react. She reached the very shore, paused for a moment, and then took the last step and disappeared under the water without a splash, as if the lake had swallowed her whole. "No, no!" Sasha screamed, his voice breaking with horror. He grabbed Vika by the hand and they tried to run, but their steps were becoming slower and slower. Vika felt the air around her thickening, invisible hands grabbing her by the shoulders and pulling her down. And suddenly she heard it, voices. They came from the depths of the lake, soft, calling, promising peace. Among them were familiar voices, Igor's voice, Marina's whisper, "Come to us, it's safe here, it's warm here." Vika covered her ears, trying not to listen, but her body no longer obeyed. She took one step at a time toward the water, her mind protesting, but her legs moved on their own. Sasha tried to hold her back, but his strength was leaving him. When he fell to his knees, he realized that he was alone. The lake slowly glowed as if mocking him. It seemed to him that Igor's face appeared in the water for a moment, and it was smiling, warmly, invitingly. He no longer resisted. The whisper became louder, turned into a song, promising that all fears would go away if he just took a step. The lake attracted him like a magnet. He stood up, stepped toward the water, and felt its icy embrace envelop him. The light flared one last time and went out. The next morning there was nothing left on the shore. No things, no traces, no fire. The locals passing by only shook their heads. "Another one has disappeared," they said to each other. And the lake remained calm, silent, hiding in its depths the shadows of those who dared to come too close.